What's up, Porsche fanatics? Will here with Rennthusiast, my YouTube channel centering on air-cooled Porsche 911 ownership experience. And while most of this content is all about air-cooled 911s, I do occasionally feature water-cooled Porsches on the channel, which brings me to today's topic, an interview with a very passionate owner of a Porsche 968. So if you are looking to learn as much about the Porsche 968 as you can, then I've got great news for you, because the guy that I met with, James, is going to take us through the history of the 968. He's going to talk about his specific example. He'll share with us why he bought the car. He'll tell us about the general price range for an example like his. And so I think by the end of this, you're going to maybe reconsider your view of the 968 if you're not a fan. Candidly, when I scheduled this interview, I had some question marks in my mind around why anybody would want one of these cars. But after spending time with James, learning about the model, walking around his example, and then driving it, I think I get it now. So before we jump into the content though, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my channel, and I'd also like to invite you to come join my Facebook group, Rennthusiast Air-Cooled Porsche Fans. That group has people sharing pictures of their air-cooled cars, they're answering technical questions, scheduling drives, and all that kind of stuff. So as long as you aren't anti-Facebook, come join us. Let's now jump into the interview. Okay guys, we are here with James, who took us through his 997.2 a little while back. That video did quite well, a lot of great information, and I have zero doubts that this one will be the same way. He has a lot of passion for this car. A little self-disclosure, I don't know a lot about the Porsche 968, so I'm excited to learn just as much as you guys are. So James, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could just tell us about the model itself, and then tell us a little bit about your particular example. We'll go from there.
Sure. To tell the 968 story, you really have to go back to the beginning of the 911. When they released that, it was a significant price difference from the 356 it preceded. And so Porsche quickly realized they needed an entry-level sports car to pair with it. So they created the 912, which was basically the 911 with a 4-cylinder engine and a few other cost savings measures. When they went into the 1970s, they continued that whole entry-level sports car concept with a collaboration with Volkswagen in the 914. And that led to another design program with Volkswagen, where Volkswagen's looking for their own sports car, and Porsche helped them design this model. Near the last minute though, Volkswagen pulled out, and Porsche realized that they still needed an entry-level sports car to replace the 914, so they bought back the rights and worked with Volkswagen to build what would become the 924, the first of the transaxle sports cars for Porsche. Transaxle meaning front engine, rear mounted transmission over the rear axle. And that first car, the 924, was a 4-cylinder base car with a whole lot of Volkswagen parts in it. Now Porsche continued this on very rapidly with what would become the 928, or the flagship transaxle car with the V8 powered engine for Porsche, very popular as well. And that the 4-cylinder model, though it sold well, it was always kind of hamstrung from all of those Volkswagen parts and really an underpowered engine. So Porsche attempted there in the late 70s to rectify that by first turbocharging the engine, and then in the early 1980s by revamping the model, rebadging it the 944, giving it a real Porsche engine and several other upgrades. And that 944 and the series that would continue on in the 1980s with the 944, the 944 Turbo, and the 944S became a huge sales success for Porsche, and really an iconic car series for the company. And then in 1992, we saw the final iteration here, which became the 968 and ran through 1995, when both it and the 928 were removed from production, and we saw Porsche transfer over to total water-cooled function. So this is really kind of the penultimate model of those transaxle cars. It gains all of the lessons learned from the 924 and 44 series, all of those updates that you'd want in the car, kind of the last of that era. For me, what drove me to this car specifically was in already owning a 911 and really seeing that as the iconic sports car from Porsche. I was obviously excited about having that. Every time I got in my 911 and drove somewhere, I enjoyed the ride. And when I would get out of that car and get in one of my other cars, whether I was driving a coupe or a sedan or an SUV, I wasn't getting that experience. And it didn't take long for me to realize, well, hey, why don't I just buy another Porsche and I can have that. I already had the 997. I wasn't really interested in the 996. And so that put me now looking back in the air-cooled market. And as we've seen over the last few years, the air-cooled market has just exploded to the point where the kind of car I would want, the quality of the car I'd want, was outside of the budget range and outside of the middle stretch I could take in buying that. And so then I started looking at the transaxle cars, 928s, 944s, and I saw the 968 as the ability to have the best of all of those features, and really focus my attention there. All of those kind of factors went into why I was looking for this car. Wanting something that I could drive every day, enjoy every day, have that kind of classic feel, but not have to break the bank and go to something in the 911 air-cooled realm.
Okay, so you have told us about the Porsche 968 history. You've told us about the 968 performance. What can you tell us about your particular example?
For me, when I first got into looking at the 968s, did a lot of research, searched around, and I'm a huge fan of the Porsche Club of America, and specifically their classified section versus maybe a dealership or a specialty dealership or an online auction, just because you can connect with the buyers or the owners that are very passionate like you are, and oftentimes you get long-term ownership over the cars. And I found a guy who was out in Nebraska. We connected, and I decided to purchase his 92. It was a black on tan with the original Cup ones. Beautiful car. Flew out to Nebraska with my best friend. We drove it back, and I immediately just fell in love with the car for its usability, classic feel, and really became what I called my sport utility vehicle. Really enjoyed that early 92 car, but I came to a point where I had to sell one of the cars in the fleet. I let that one go, but immediately regretted it and started looking for the next one. And in this car, I knew that I wanted a later model, and I knew I wanted Guards Red. And I know there are a lot of guys out there that they'll tell you, I don't want to see another red, silver, or black Porsche. But for me, Guards Red was such a iconic color for Porsche in the 80s and early 90s. I'm a Marine. That's a strong color for us, and I just think when it's cleaned up, it really looks great. So I fell in love with the color, and it may sound silly, 94, 95, why one of those over the earlier ones? Those with the sport options came with the Cup 2s. I really like the look of those. And then the seats. The 94s and 95s replaced the earlier seats that we were familiar with from the 944 series and the 911s from the late 80s and the 964 series with the ones that we would see a few years later in the 993. And then in the back seats, they changed the design from what had once been kind of a one-piece vinyl clamshell type seating section to one that we're more familiar with the 911, where the carpeting runs along the transmission tunnel and in this section here in your lumbar, and then you've got the more traditional pattern at the base in the back. And little things like that just set the car a little bit different for me and made it what I wanted to look for in that. Was able to find this car and agree on a price with the seller, and it had all of the documentation, great history on it. I knew it needed a little bit of work, but it was all stuff that I could do. So once I got it here, the first thing I did was a full interior and exterior detailing, paint correction and protection, really bring the red back and the popping. And then as far as updates, any classic Porsche owner will understand the need to switch out the original headlight bulbs with something that's going to allow you to see at night. So I put LED bulbs in the headlights. Then I refurbished the wheels. And while I was doing that, looked at the brakes, the calipers, the paint had started to peel on those. Originally those are black, so I had those repainted in red, kind of period of the big red turbo brakes from the early 90s. And like they say on HJTV, it gives it a little pop of color. I like the way that looks as well. And then I had an aftermarket exhaust put on it from Billy Boat. It's nowhere near Rice Rocket territory, but it gives just a little bit of resonance that was missing from the 4-cylinder. A great look as well. Really enjoy that, especially when you're really up in the higher rev ranges. And then on the interior updates, everybody will know those 90s cars all came with the rectangular large airbag steering wheels. I'm a big believer that the things that you see and feel and touch every day have added importance, so I swapped that out with the 968 Club Sport wheel that you see here. I really like the thicker grip around it as well. It gives me a better view of the gauges, a nice update. To the right of that, you'll see that I replaced the original stereo, which, like for most owners who have these cars, some previous owner had taken the Porsche Classic cassette deck out and replaced it with an aftermarket CD player. I went with the Porsche Classic communication module, which I highly recommend. Not only does it look great, but it gives you all that updated tech that you want, so I can wirelessly stream my music. I can talk, you know, hands-free on my phone. And then I've got a couple of cup holders. I found this one here on the side from Amazon. It's got nice red deviated stitching, holds my drink, my cell phone, my wallet. And then there's another one I found that fits into the rail for the passenger seat. Nothing extreme, but just things that make it a little bit more personalized and usable on a day-to-day basis for me.
Okay, James, I love asking owners this question because I think it helps those viewers out there who are thinking about buying one of these and they're trying to understand what it would be like to own a 968. So what do you like most about this car?
Sure. For me, I'd probably break that down into 3 sections. Personally, for me, what I like most about it is the feeling it gives me. Every time I walk into the garage and I see it, it makes me smile. I look for excuses to take it out and drive it because it is so engaging. Unlike the cars that are offered now, they got 500 horsepower. You know, you're already breaking the speed limit as you're just getting into second gear. You don't have to work through the car. This one, you know, you interface with the car a little more, especially since it's the manual. I've got just as many miles per mile doing 60 miles an hour on a back road as you might do 120 in another car. And it gives me kind of that throwback feel to all of the things that I love about the car that just aren't in new cars. The newer cars just don't inspire me like these do. And maybe it's because I grew up in this time frame. I was in high school and college when these cars were out, so it's a little bit of a familiarity reach back thing to it. Second part of that is how it makes my kids feel, and that was important to me. I grew up in the back of a Porsche, and I enjoyed all of the memories that I got to make with my dad in his car, and I love being able to pass that on to my kids. And a lot of people you'll see review these cars, they'll bemoan the fact that the back seats are unusable, and I completely call BS on that. Sure, as the kids get older and taller, you've got to move the seats up a little bit, but unlike the 911 that has a very sloping roof line, in these cars, you've actually got quite a bit of headroom in the back seat, and my kids have been able to enjoy this you know, well into their teens. And that, to me, having them be able to come on a Porsche driving event with me, or you know, just running out to get ice cream, it's always fun to have them be a part of the experience. And then the last piece is how it affects other people. And I don't mean that to say that I'm looking for my own personal satisfaction off of, you know, other people's opinions. What I mean by that is these cars inspire something in people. Part of that is the rarity of the 968 model. You know, because it was only made from 92 to 95, and this was a really difficult time for Porsche financially, you know, they only brought like 2,500 of these or so into North America, USA and Canada, in the coupe models. So think about how many of those are still on the road, how many have, you know, been trashed out and are in a junkyard somewhere, or how many are track day cars, how many are in some private collection. I can probably count on one hand the number of times I've seen one of these on the road. A lot of times you'll see people that'll pass me on the road, they'll back up, they'll give you the thumbs up, they'll pull around to get a picture, or they'll stop when they see you at a gas station or at a store and come by and they'll just say, hey, what is that? I know it's a Porsche, but I don't know that car, that's really cool. Or my dad used to have one. And being able to share that experience with guys and still be able to be out on the road, that's another one of the things. I take a little bit extra pride in maintaining the car and how I take care of it.
All right, let's now jump over to common Porsche 968 problems that prospective buyers might run into.
Sure, I think the first thing I would say is universally, whether you're buying one of these, a 944, 928, 911, regardless of what the model is, If it's a 30-year-old car, it's going to have 30-year-old wear and tear type problems. So whether it's been driven regularly and maintained well, or it's been sitting in a garage somewhere, normal wear and tear is going to happen. So rubber seals and bushings are going to need to be replaced, timing belts and things like that. The big thing on these cars, because it's a interface engine, is the timing belt that you have, interface belts. When you change those, it's not terribly expensive, but you want to stay on top of the maintenance cycle for those. And while you're in there, it's recommended you do the water pump while you're in there. The rest of it seems to be just normal stuff. I've never had any major problems with either my 92 or now my 94 on the car, but little things like the rubber trims around these seals were things that I had to replace when I bought the car. What you're really looking for is the maintenance history on it. And I'm more inclined to find a higher mileage car that's been well maintained, like this one. It doesn't look like it, but this has got 112,000 miles on the car. But I was more comfortable in purchasing the car because I know that they're reliable and they can take many miles on them. But because the history on the car showed that it had regular use and regular service. There wasn't deferred maintenance. There weren't periods where the car sat for long times. So having a good history on the car is really important. I think overall condition is obviously important as well. There's some people that would be very happy getting into one of these and they don't care if the clear coat is peeling off and the dash is cracked. They just want to enjoy the drive. But I'm one who wants the car to be as presentable and as close to original as possible. So when you're looking at the car, you need to factor those things in. In any Porsche, especially the classic ones, the parts are hard to source and they're expensive. And when you have a limited run car like this, they're definitely going to be harder to source than they might have been for the 944 series that preceded it. And then you've got the whole issue of who you're going to have to work on it. There are a lot of dealerships now that may only have one technician at a Porsche dealership that works on their older cars, and they really don't even want the service. So they may price you out of having work done there. So now you're looking at specialty shops, which can be expensive as well. And if you don't live in an area that's got a couple that you can price against, that may be an issue for you as well.
All right, let's talk about, the market from a pricing perspective. We all know the market's nuts and this is a big question. What price would someone who's looking to buy one of these 968s, what would they expect to pay?
Yeah, that's been really difficult to put a firm number on, especially as we've seen the market go crazy with this whole pandemic. I would caution you to use the auction sites like Bring a Trailer as your definitive mark, because what we see all too often there are 2 or 3 guys competing these things up and outbidding each other to the point where the price that it finally sells at is not an accurate relation. So you can track these sales in other venues. Again, I go to Porsche Club America quite often to look at those things. But you're going to see a wide range of prices depending on the specific model and the condition that it's in. I would say if you're looking for a real barn find that's going to need massive amount of work, you're probably somewhere in the $8,000 to $10,000 range. And if you're looking for one that's drivable but still needs a significant amount of effort, you're probably in the mid to high teens. Now you get in the category of ones that look really good and drive really well. Now you're probably in the mid to high 20s, and the really low mileage ones well above $30,000. For these, the coupes seem to sell a little better than the cabriolets, and the manuals go a little better than the Tiptronics. The Club Sports, which were never available here in the US, it was a rest of the world type model. Those are now importable into the US, and we've seen those over the last couple of years. Those have really pulled in the most money. I've seen those selling from $75,000 to $100,000. So you've really got to define what you're looking for, what your price point wants to be. Again, remembering to set probably 5% aside for necessary maintenance you're going to run into or modifications you want to have on there.
Well, guys, if you have any questions or thoughts about this car, I know James will be watching the comments, so just leave them down in the comments. He'll be happy to jump on them. I know that he did that with his 997.2 video. This has been great, man. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me to show us this car, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
So as you can see, a lot of passion for the Porsche 968. I don't know about you, but I could be convinced to buy one of these cars at some point to join the other cars in my garage. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, please subscribe to my channel. This is the kind of thing I do. I hope to see you next time. I'm Addy.